Well, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Lou Chance. I'm the Director of Pupil Services here in the district. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to meet, as many of you know, we've spent the last several months, if not really the whole year, with a renewed focus in the district on providing resources and information to students and parents on the topics of mental health and wellness, and specifically on the topics of anxiety and suicide awareness. We're fortunate to have with us tonight Mr. Chris Locke, who's here to share with us his story, in that he unfortunately lost his son Sean last July to suicide. As you see, he's going to be engaging you in an honest conversation about depression, anxiety, suicide, some signs and warning signs potentially. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting us and letting us speak this evening. Next to me here is my son, who's my IT guy, because I'm terrible with this stuff. So what we thought we'd do, and we usually do in these presentations, just do a quick video so you can see what my son Sean, what he was like and who he was. So. My son was a great kid. He was kind and caring and a loving person. Had a smile that literally lit up a room. He was respected and always wanted to do his best. Sean and I was very close. We talked about everything except for one thing. Sean was just like all of your kids. He wanted to be the best at everything. He tried. He attended a small private school called Mount Avery Academy. He loved going to school, and he loved his classmates, and remained friends with all of them until his last day. He fell in love with the game of basketball there, and he was really good at it. As an 8th grader, he scored 45 points in a single game. Not bad when you consider each quarter was only 6 minutes long. And he was a big man on campus at a very small school. Then Sean attended St. Mark's High School in Delaware, much bigger school. There was over 350 kids in his freshman class. His graduating class in Mount Avery was 24. St. Mark's was a big change for him. Yet he embraced the challenges and became a student leader, and he was active in student government. He was vice president of his freshman, sophomore, junior class, and became vice president of the executive council. He ran unopposed every single time. The only reason why he didn't run for president was because one of his oldest friends was the president, and his friendship meant more than some resume builder. He was active in Blue Gold, Students Against Drunk Driving. You saw in one of the pictures, he was homecoming king. He was really a big man on campus at St. Mark's. He excelled at sports. He played baseball at St. Mark's. They won the state championship in 2012. He was first freshman in school history to be a starter on the boys' varsity basketball team. He was one of the top scorers in school history, despite missing 7 games his senior year for some injuries. His athletic success, he was awarded the Sportsman of the Year award in 2012. And his name is on the plaque as you enter the gym. He was also a big man on campus at St. Mark's. His senior year, he tore his ACL. It's really damaged his meniscus, and it was a really horrible injury. It took all summer after he graduated from high school and his entire freshman year at the University of Delaware to rehab it. But his hard work and dedication paid off. In his sophomore year, he re-earned his scholarship and was part of the UD championship team that year that went on to March Madness. And he realized the boyhood dream playing against Michigan State in the March Madness tournament. His sophomore year, he received the Unsung Hero Award that year from UD. He was an academic All-American basketball player 3 years in a row. He was named captain of the team his senior year and won the Unsung Hero Award for a second time his senior year. He's the only player in UD history to win it twice. People loved him, and he was a big man on campus at UD. After University of Delaware, he graduated with a business degree. He worked for a large real estate development company in Wilmington called Puccini Poland. He managed $150 million worth of real estate for him. He was on his way. People loved him at work. The owners loved him. They had big plans for him, and he was going to be a big man here in Delaware. As you can probably tell, I'm pretty proud of him. But for all of Sean's amazing accomplishments, he did not succeed in the most important thing facing him, and that was his fight against depression. Sean lost that fight on July 18th of last year when he ended his life. See, Sean made the fatal mistake of not getting help for his depression and anxiety. Sean did not ask for help because people with depression are ashamed of their disease. They feel bad for being depressed. People with depression feel ungrateful. Sean thought, look at me, look at all my success, look at my family, look at my friends. I should not feel depressed. But to a person with depression, this guilt of being ungrateful just makes his depression even worse. As I said in the beginning, Sean and I talked about everything except for one thing, and that was his depression and anxiety. He never allowed me or our family to help him because he never spoke about it. He hid behind a mask that everything is great, but behind the mask was my little boy battling with a disease called depression. See, that's the thing about this hideous disease. It doesn't care how popular or unpopular you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a great athlete, a great dancer, a great cook, a great child, or even a great parent. See, depression is this indiscriminate disease, no different than heart disease or cancer. But unlike cancer or heart disease, depression immobilizes, paralyzes the person to seek the help they need to fight the disease. Tonight, we're here to begin the first steps to educate you about depression and anxiety and make you aware of the help that is out there. Today, we're going to take the stigma out of depression. So people like maybe some of you here in this audience do not suffer in silence and fear any longer. Depression is a real thing. It's a real disease. And we must begin the process of helping all those who are suffering in the darkness. We're going to unlock the light so that we can expose this horrible disease for what it is. Depression is not a character failing. It is not a moral failing. It's a disease. Today we'll discuss the types of depression, the effects social media has on depression and anxiety, the signs of a suicidal person, and how to help such a person. You will hear the devastating effect suicide has had on family and friends. At times you may feel uncomfortable, but we hope at the end you will begin to talk to each other about this and start to get the help for those who need it. So you'll be hearing from a few people this evening. The first person is Jennifer Smallwitz, who is with the Mental Health Association of Delaware, and she'll educate us a little bit.
Good evening. Can everyone hear? The first one I want to go over is an adjustment disorder with a depressed mood, and really a good snapshot as to what this looks like. It's feeling more hopeless and more sad after a life event than would typically be expected. So some of those life events could be moving, changing schools, even moving from middle school to high school, even as young as elementary to middle school, that new adjustment. It could be if there's a marriage or a divorce in the family. The birth of a child, especially if it's a much younger sibling, and if it's a sibling that's born into, that might be a half sibling or so. Again, it's just a major adjustment. So if your child or even a friend of yours is experiencing a little bit more sadness than typically expected, that could be part of the adjustment disorder. It could also be a loss of a relationship or reacting to a severe illness. And with this, it usually lasts up to 6 months or so. And you can see there are some impacts that it has on a person's sleep. It also has impact on their schoolwork, their social functioning in general. You may see a change in their friends and things like that as well. With the next one, dysthymia, it is very low grade and it's very chronic. It lasts more than a year. You may see this in children as young as late elementary school. With that as well, there's a lot of irritability and low self-esteem that goes along with it. You will see changes in eating and sleeping patterns, and I know that can also be typical teenage behavior, but just something to be aware of if it is going along with some other things, such as the low self-esteem and major life events. This one really interferes with the concentration and decision-making, so you might see changes in grades as well, schoolwork, just the ability to do schoolwork in general, and the interference with learning, socialization, and overall functioning. I do want to point out too that most adolescents, about 20% of adolescents will be affected by depression by the time they reach adulthood. So it is something that affects many of us, many of the children. It is something to be aware of. With bipolar disorder, this is where a person will have periods of low but also periods of high and those periods of mania. During their mania, there's going to be a reduced need for sleep. They may be up all night. You may think, how are you not tired? And they're constantly going and aren't stopping. There's difficulties focusing here, and the person may be very short-tempered. During these manic episodes, they may be talking extremely fast, feeling overall overly silly or overly happy. And I know overly happy, you may be like, well, that's a good thing, right? But if they're really happy about everything and you know there's something that could be bothering them and they're just not expressing it, that could be part of mania as well. And during this time, they may be willing to engage in a variety of different risky behaviors. And then lastly, with major depression, this is that chronic sadness. It's that overall sadness, there's that irritability. This is where someone may really start talking about suicide as well. And we'll talk in a little bit about what those warning signs of suicide look like. But there's that lack of interest and there's that physical pain that goes along with it too. The person may express to you that they feel like they've been working out really hard or ran a marathon yesterday and maybe they haven't been doing anything. But there's something, an ache and pain that goes with it. We've had people say to us that, I feel like there's an elephant sitting on my shoulders. Everything just hurts. And there's a physical pain that goes along with the mental pain they may be experiencing.
Hi everyone, my name is Allison Short, and I had the honor of graduating from St. Mark's in 2012 and the University of Delaware in 2016 with my friend Sean Locke. I am here tonight to talk to you about Sean and the amazing friendship he gave to not only myself, but to the multitudes of lives that he touched every day. I can stand here in front of you tonight and tell you that anyone who met Sean never had a bad thing to say about him. He truly brought happiness, laughter, and joy to everyone around him. His peers loved him, his teachers adored him, his coaches were in awe of him. He was the friend that your parents wanted you to always have in your life. I met Sean when we were just 14 years old and freshmen in high school. We became close friends very quickly, which didn't surprise me because Sean was one of the most personable, funny, outgoing, and caring individuals I have ever met to this day. Through our years at St. Mark's and University of Delaware, we formed incredible memories that I will always cherish, especially being crowned homecoming king and queen together, as you can see in that picture right there. We thought it was hysterical that we would have to slow dance together because he was 6'4" and I was 4'11". Sean was given the senior superlative best all around, and that's truly what he was. A role model for others, an incredible student, an amazing athlete, the friend who always made time to talk to you when you needed support, and the person who brings people together to enjoy life and not take it too seriously sometimes. If anyone ever told me that Sean would take his own life by suicide, I never in a million years would have believed them. Sean Locke was the core of our friend group. He was the one who shaped us into a family, and although our friend group would share our hopes, dreams, fears, and secrets with one another, we truly had no idea what Sean was fighting internally. It's going to be hard for all of Sean's friends moving forward in life without him. When we are getting married, purchasing our first homes, advancing in our careers, or even having children one day, we pictured Sean being there to celebrate all of these moments with us, and we pictured ourselves doing the same for Sean. The loss that his entire community feels is something that no parent, no sibling, no friend should ever have to endure. The pain and sadness of losing him is unbearable at times. We need to create more discussions, more awareness, and more safe places where a person feels comfortable about speaking up when they simply do not feel right. We would do anything to go back and have Sean open up to myself, his friends, his family, anyone. Sean gave myself and his friends the greatest friendship we could have ever asked for, and we would not be the people we are today without having him in our lives the past 10 years. The world truly lost an amazing person. If depression and suicide can happen to the funniest, most loved guy that I knew, then it can happen to anyone. Talking about mental health with friends and family may seem uncomfortable at first, but I know everyone would have taken an uncomfortable conversation with Sean over the death of our friend any and every day. I hope that we can defeat the stigma that surrounds mental health. Depression is not always permanent, but suicide is. We need to be able to openly talk about mental health without fear or shame. If this stigma did not exist, Sean may have been able to reach out and get the help that he needed, and he could still be here with us today. We will forever miss him.
I want to point out with this statistic, and I had somebody say it to me the other day, that a statistic is just a number until it represents somebody that you love. So a lot of time we see facts and figures go by and we really may not pay much attention to them, but when these numbers are represented by somebody that we've lost, somebody that we've loved, somebody, whether it's a friend, family member, whoever it might be, that's when that statistic really begins to become real. So there won't be really too many statistics in here, but we just wanted to point out that it is something that we are seeing often. I know it was seen in this community and something that is a worldwide crisis. When thinking about what leads to suicide, there's not one specific thing. Depression is the most common condition that is associated with suicide, but I want to point out that not everybody who has depression will have suicide ideation, and many people do die by suicide who are never diagnosed with depression. So while there is a very high correlation, and part of the correlation is why we're here tonight, there are other people who are affected by it as well. As far as some of the warning signs, some things to look out for are their talks, their behaviors, and their moods. So if they're talking about an unbearable pain, they don't see a way out, they feel like, again, everything hurts. Maybe the world hurt them, people in their life hurt them, they want to hurt themselves. When you're hearing about that unbearable pain, if they're talking about feeling like a burden to others, I don't want to burden you with my problems, you have your own things going on, or things would be better off without me here. Those are some things you want to look out for. If somebody's mentioning that they're feeling trapped, feeling like they're in a black hole and they can't crawl their way out, or feel like they're just feeling overwhelmed, they feel like they're drowning, they feel like really there's no way out, the walls are closing in, that's something else we want to pay attention to as well. We want to encourage them to find those reasons to live. We can't necessarily give them those reasons, but we want to encourage them to find them. They may not see them in the moment, but identifying what some of those strengths are that they have. The fact that they're reaching out to you for help, that's a strength in itself. So encouraging them to continue to do that. And openly talking about killing oneself can be something we want to obviously pay attention to as well. This could also be causing harm to others we want to pay attention to. And with talking about it, it's not just what they're verbally saying. It could be certain movies they're watching, shows, music they're listening to. And we'll talk a lot about social media, but really paying attention to what they're liking on social media, because there might be a blogger who's able to put into words how they're feeling. So if you're seeing them like a certain thing, paying attention to what that looks like. As far as their behaviors, if you see that they're isolating themselves from you, from their friends, they really just want to be alone, really prohibiting them from being alone as much as possible. Obviously, we want to respect privacy and things like that, but making sure that we are looking out for everyone. Use of drugs and alcohol. Maybe they've never used or you see an increase in use, we want to pay attention to that as well. Acting aggressively and recklessly, they may not care what happens. They may be willing to take more chances because, again, they don't want to be here, so they don't care. Also, a lot of people know that they're leaving loved ones behind, but still feel that they do need to take their life. And a lot of reasons for that is that they can't live with that unbearable pain that they are experiencing. Changes in sleeping, they may be sleeping all the time or not sleeping at all. There is an increase of suicides in the early morning hours as well, and a lot of that has to do with sleeping patterns. And then withdrawing from those activities they love. If you have somebody who always played an instrument, all of a sudden they want nothing to do with it. Or again, changes in their friends group, that's a huge red flag. With their mood, they might be showing a depressed state overall. Again, there's that loneliness, that sadness that could go along with it. Feeling very anxious, you might see changes in their body, their legs might be shaking more, they might be pacing back and forth more. They could also be losing hair at a more frequent pace. If they've been humiliated, especially now, we know that if something happens, it used to just stay in the school, right? But now we know that by the time noon comes around, it could be viral. So there's that humiliation that may stick with them. They may feel like they never can recover from that. Feeling more irritable about something, and again, that loss of interest is something to pay attention to. Another way to remember some of the warning signs is through the term facts. And some of those feelings are those hopelessness and helplessness feeling that nothing can be done to make their life better. Things are bad and they won't get any better. To them, it could be the worst thing that's happened to them. Your child may express to you, oh, I broke up with my boyfriend or my girlfriend, and they might be 13, and you might be thinking, well, don't worry, there's going to be others, you're going to have other harder times. But remembering that this could be the worst thing that's happened to them at that point, so we want to make sure we're supporting it. That fear of losing control, that things aren't in their control anymore, whether it's grades, things are starting to spiral. Acting out on wanting to harm themselves can be something to look for as well. And feeling worthless, feeling awful and thinking people would be better off without them. You may hear them say it, you may see them express it in other ways. This could be with low self-esteem, and they may also be feeling guilty or shameful about something, especially if it's a past event. This is where loneliness can really come into play as well, and loneliness is really becoming a strong predictor for premature death. More and more people are dying from loneliness, so that's something we definitely have to pay more attention to. And if they're feeling more anxious or worried, that's one of the feelings, if they're expressing that we really want to see as a red flag. With some of the actions, it can be engaging in drug and alcohol abuse, talking and writing about death or destruction. Again, this is where social media comes in, what they're liking. If it's a younger child, asking them to draw a picture. Many children will draw a picture of their family and they're not in the picture, and that's a reason to find out, why aren't you in the picture? It could be as simple as oh, I was just drawing what I see, but it could be something more to it as well. So really paying attention, having the teachers pay attention to what's happening in art and in English classes as well. Some of the changes, the biggest one is their personality. If they're not acting how you typically know them to be, that's a huge red flag. I always give the Tigger and the Pooh analogy, the Winnie the Pooh analogy, as far as when we see somebody who's always energetic and bouncing around and always part of everything, and all of a sudden not Winnie the Pooh, I'm sorry, Eeyore, and they start to be a little bit more sluggish, we think something must be wrong. But often when people are thinking, oh, they go from being more sluggish and then they start being more engaged and energetic, we maybe think the problem fixed itself, things are better, but that's also when a lot of people do die by suicide after a sudden improvement in their mood. And that's because they've come to terms with their decision to die by suicide and they know that the end to their pain is near. So we want to pay attention to any type of mood or personality change, whether it's happy to sad, sad to happy, by themselves, well, to engage, or vice versa. The threats can be, I don't want to be here much longer, and really finding out what do they mean by here. If it's a student, do they not want to be in the class anymore? Do they not want to be in Pennsylvania anymore and they want to go off to college? What does here mean? Really finding out what the words are. And they may just say, I won't be around much longer, you won't have to worry about me much longer. And lastly, with the situations, this could be getting in trouble at school, at work, at home, with the law even. Any type of recent loss, whether it's the loss of a parent, a friend, a pet, a breakup, the loss of straight A's can even be one as well if you see a change in their grades. Those overwhelming changes in life, and again, it might not seem overwhelming to you, and to you it might seem so minimal, but to them it could be everything. A friend moving to another school or being their only friend in their class, no longer being in that class could even be something. And the exposure to suicide or death of a peer or loved one is definitely a red flag and something to keep in mind as well. Some other risk factors, there are some mental health conditions that do put a person at risk, at a higher risk, and that would be depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. So if there is any depression or anxiety or underlying mental health concerns in the family, just keeping that in mind as well, that just being more open to talking about it as a family and seeking out the resources that are there. Some of the health conditions, a lot of times people will have a health condition that it could impact how they're feeling about themselves emotionally and mentally, so just paying attention to that as well. The best way to reduce the risk of suicide is to restrict the access to the lethal means. So you'll see more and more on bridges and other places where it is a higher lethal mean. We will see more and more signs for suicide prevention numbers and things like that. There are trying to put more netting on bridges as well to try to restrict it as much as possible, but really just restricting it in general. If there is a gun in the home, making sure it's locked up and that they don't have access to it. Other things, stress, harassment, and bullying. We're seeing it more and more. It used to be if you were bullied at school, you could go home and feel safe. We know that's not always the case now. So if there is something going on, not just saying kids are being kids or they're just acting how they should be, really paying more attention to what is going on. I don't want to say interfering with what your kids are telling you and having them tell secrets about their friends, but really, and not saying that none of you do pay attention to them, but really just asking all those questions. How was school today? Not letting them just say fine. What was the high and what was the low of your day? If they don't have a high and low of their own day, what about a friend of yours? Finding out from you what's going on. Often we don't want to talk to our own parents because we're ashamed of things or we don't want to disappoint them, but we're willing to talk to our friends' parents. Or we might want our friends to tell their parents so that it gets back to our parents without them having to tell us directly. And again, the stressful life events that we talked about, family changes, any type of loss or major life transition. And then with the historical ones, if there is a family history of suicide, we want to pay attention to that. And the ACE factors really come into play with the childhood abuse, neglect, or trauma, the adverse childhood experiences. That's something, depending on how the child was raised, there could be more factors that increase the risk of suicide.
Hello, My name is Aiden, and I'm going to talk to you about the influence suicide has had on my life. One thing that I often hear is, I can't imagine the pain you're dealing with, or I can't relate what you're going through. I'm going to try to help you understand how I felt when I heard the news that would change my life forever. So imagine you're 17 years old. You're just working a summer job, there's 10 minutes left in the workday. And all of a sudden you get a call from your boss saying, I need you to head back to the office right now. To me, this was an odd request because work was basically over. So I just kept on working, finishing up the job, but then I got another call. It was my boss again, and he was even more urgent. So you leave, you go back to the office, and when you arrive, you're told to go straight home. You finally get home and you call your dad. You can hear the pain in his voice. At this point, you know that whatever has happened is really bad, and you start to feel uneasy. He tells you, I need you to be strong, I need you to be a man. Don't turn on the TV, don't pick up the phone, just sit there and wait for us to come home. I waited for about half an hour. Didn't look at my phone, didn't watch TV, I just sat there and tried to come up with any possible scenario of what could have possibly went wrong. My mother came through the door alongside my brother Victor, looking absolutely distraught. She tells me, Sean is dead. I am instantly filled with disbelief, so naturally I say, what? This can't be happening. She then explains to me that he took his life and that he was very depressed. There I stood, lost in time, trying to figure out how this could have happened. It felt like somebody ripped out my heart and left me stranded. My brother Sean went from this guy who I thought could never feel sad or low to knowing he was depressed, felt hopeless, and took his life. Take a personal role model. It could be your brother, sister, best friend, any family member. Somebody who you spend every free minute with. Now imagine never being able to talk to them, see them, or hug them ever again. These are simple things that I will never be able to do, like sit with him at a family dinner, hear his voice, look him in the eyes, see his body, hear him breathe. The worst part is that no matter what, my brother and I will always be 6 feet apart. Now he's the only thing that's ever on my mind. Sometimes I go to my guidance counselor just so I have a place to go and cry and talk about it. There are a few nights when I don't go to bed feeling absolutely full of sadness over this. I used to think Sean was the closest to me, but it turns out he had a secret demon inside of him. Sean was somebody who I told all my secrets to, and he would do the same. Except he didn't tell me the biggest secret of them all, that he was struggling. He was struggling to feel happiness, to feel comfortable, to feel completed. My everyday life has been completely changed. Every day I hear somebody make a joke about suicide because of a minor inconvenience in their life. Mental illness is not something to be joked about. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's a disease. If you're struggling, please search help. Don't feel like you can conquer this battle on your own, because chances are you can't, and that's okay. Life is a gift. What we choose to do with it is ultimately up to us. Never in a million years did I think I would have to help plan my 24-year-old brother's funeral at the age of 17. But the sad thing is that my story isn't rare. It happens all the time. Don't make somebody else have to go through that either. Thank you.
So as you can see up here worldwide, we are spending more and more time on social media each day, and I'm willing to bet, and you're probably all going to agree with me, that here in the US it's probably more than 135 minutes per day. I think every time we see anyone really, there's some type of social media, whether they're using it, they have that easy access to it. While it was intended to be a great thing, and there are many pros to social media, we know there are a lot of cons that go along with it as well. And yes, it does share information at a much faster rate, but we know it's not always the correct information. We know that the adults don't always have time to process the information before youth find out about it. There is that access for those survivor groups to talk to one another, to reach out to one another, but keeping in mind as well that for every great group there is out there online, there's also non-encouraging groups as well, and discouraging ones altogether. Some of the cons, we know that cyberbullying is only getting worse, and it is something that's out there. A lot of times people will glamorize suicide. We see that a lot in our media, not necessarily taking it to the seriousness that it is. And those filtered highlight reels, there's that increase of, I want to be like everybody else. And we'll talk a little bit more about the fear of missing out and things like that as well. And with this one, I always think back to that commercial where there's a husband FaceTiming with his wife, and in the picture, everything in the kitchen looks clean and perfect and crystal clean and everything like that. And as the camera draws back, there's spaghetti sauce everywhere and paint everywhere, and not everything's what you see. So on that screen, everything seems perfect, but as the camera draws back, we know that's not necessarily the case. And social media is really like that as well. So for those of you who have children who are on social media a lot, they may be at home by themselves, seeing all their friends out, seeing these things. So those are some impacts that can be really detrimental to a young person, really to adults as well. And there is that instant access to those traumatic events. Again, sometimes that information isn't filtered through adults before we hear about it as youth as well. There is an increase in anxiety with the increase in social media use. Again, wanting to be like others, seeing that there's other people hanging out without them, the pressures that people are putting all their accomplishments, those highlight reels. I want to be just like everyone else, and if you're feeling like you're not, there could be an increase in anxiety that goes along with that. Less self-control, a lot of times they might be engaging in behaviors that they see other people behaving in them, so they think they should be doing it too. They may feel less self-control altogether. Well, this is what everybody else is doing, I might as well be doing it as well. There's overeating, which could also eventually turn into low self-esteem for somebody, because they might be sitting alone seeing all these things. You're sitting in front of a computer, you're watching a show on your computer, you don't realize that if you have a snack in front of you, maybe you eat the whole bag of chips and you didn't mean to. Not being outside and active as much, not being along with friends as much, they might be spending more and more time by themselves. That hive mind, that feeling everybody else is doing it, I might as well do it too. So again, there is that increase in depression, there is that increase in anxiety that goes along with higher rates of social media use, because again, everybody else is doing it. I want to be just like everyone else is something that we hear quite often. That fear of missing out, and I know now more and more people are saying JOMO, the joy of missing out, for some, and that might be more adults than youth, but there is that fear. Everyone's hanging out without me, or all my friends are at the football game and I couldn't go, or at the movies and I couldn't go, whatever that might be. So they might be saying, well, if everyone's hanging out with me, maybe they'd be better off if I wasn't here altogether. Or they may take that as a sign of everybody's hanging out without them, I don't need to be around much longer. There is that increased lower self-esteem. Again, it could be wanting to be like others. People are even going as far as having plastic surgery now to look like others and to be like what they see on Instagram. We're seeing more and more people that if they don't get the certain amount of likes that they want on a post, they take their post down on Instagram or on Facebook. There's that that sense to want to be accepted and for wanting people to like what they do. It could be a PTSD trigger as well. We know that a lot of things aren't filtered as they go online. So with that, just knowing that they may see something and be triggered by it and may have reactions that they didn't mean to see, but again, we don't always know what people are going to post. And there is that increased depression for a variety of reasons. One, it could be that sense of spending more time by themselves. It could be that lower self-esteem established by feeling like they're not fitting in with everyone, they're not looking like everyone, they don't have the newest shoes, the newest car, maybe their grades are different, they don't have a prom date, whatever those things might be, they're seeing everything on social media. Not always realizing that people aren't putting out the bad, they're usually only posting about the good. I'll let Chris talk a little bit more about this, but just being mindful of the social media use in general. I know it's something that's out there that we can't take away altogether, but just being mindful in how we use it, and he'll talk a little bit more about what social media can do to you.
So 48,000 people will die in the United States this year by suicide. Over 500,000 people will attempt suicide this year. Men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women, but women attempt suicide 3 times more than men. For every 1 suicide, 12 other people will attempt suicide. Depression affects over 30 million people here in the United States. More Americans suffer from depression than heart disease, cancer, or AIDS. And since 2000, though the death rate for heart disease has stabilized, death rate for cancer has gone down, suicide has increased by 55% in the age of 15 to 24-year-olds. The ironic thing about depression, it is one of the most treatable psychiatric illnesses. 80 to 90% of people with depression respond positively to treatment. But to be successful, the person with depression, or the people around that person, must recognize depression and seek treatment. We need to recognize that it can affect any type of kid. Sean was an athlete. Athletes have a particular difficult time dealing with depression. Sorry. They're kind of taught and they've been trained to endure a certain level of pain, and they've been taught to play through the pain. I'm a father of 7 kids, they're all athletes. I was the first to say, "You're okay, come on, go back in." Athletes are trained not to show any sign of weakness, especially when you get to the elite athlete. They're always afraid of losing their spot to the incoming freshman. So they almost never tell a coach if they're dealing with a weakness, or a parent. They are also identified with their athletic success of being strong. To admit a weakness is almost impossible for them. An athlete's life is very structured around practice, school, games, and weekend travel. But when their playing days end, and it always does, they go through a period of emptiness. No difficult than what a military vet will go through after his service or her service, or what retired individuals go after we all stop working. It has been reported that around 30% of all D1 athletes suffer depression, either in their final year of playing or the year right after. If that playing career ended due to an injury, ACL, concussion, then that rate goes up to 50%. An athlete's mindset thinks he can just push through the depression, like he pushed through his injuries, but is a recipe for failure and falling into a deeper depression. Recently, some famous athletes have come out publicly to talk about their years and bouts of depression, such as Michael Phelps, Brian Dawkins of the Eagle, Stephen Smith of the Ravens, and Jared West of the NBA, to name a few. When we also talk about depression, we also have to talk about addictions. A person with depression will many times try to self-medicate, either through alcohol, drugs, or risky behavior. Another way to self-medicate that we're seeing in high school is through juuling or vaping, which delivers a high level of nicotine or THC oils, which is highly addictive. Drugs, alcohol, vaping, it rewires your brain in such a way that if you have depression, it makes it so much worse. And if you don't have depression, such abuse of alcohol and drugs can cause you to become depressed when you're not using it. When a person is depressed and then begins to abuse alcohol or drugs or engage in risky behavior, then the likelihood of suicide increases tremendously. And as Jennifer talked about, really another type of addiction is social media. Our children are really the first generation to not know what life was like before the iPhone. Just imagine that. They have no clue what the world was like before the iPhone. And we now know when you engage with your phone, it releases a chemical called dopamine. This is the same chemical we get when we drink or do drugs. When we text people, it feels good when we get a response. We get a high from it. That's why we count how many likes we get when we post something, or how many friends we have on our social media account. And for our children, this is really, really important stuff. To us, it's kind of, yeah, but to our children, this is their life. We have how many, and if our Instagram is not getting the response we want, we get anxious. To our children, it is a traumatic event. If they're unfriended by someone or removed from somebody's snapshot, it is like being the end of the world for them. As I said, every time we get a response from a text, we feel good. We get a hit of dopamine. And dopamine is highly, highly addictive. We have age restriction on alcohol, but we have none on social media. Any age, any time, as much as you want. Basically, our children have access to a highly addictive item, social media, as they are going through some of the toughest times of their life. I saw something recently on the internet, and it'd be like our parents say, "Oh, you having a rough time in high school? Here's some alcohol." You know, that's kind of what social media is doing. It's giving them that addictiveness to it. And because our children have unfettered access to these dopamine hardwired devices, it is inhibiting them to form deep, meaningful relationships. And worse, these devices do not allow you to cope with stress in one's life. You can't turn to a device or social media to deal with stress, anxiety, or depression. And it's been proven that the more time you spend on social media, the higher the risk of depression. Too much of anything is bad. And I'm not saying don't use social media. I got an iPhone in my pocket right now. I'll look at it when I get done tonight. What I'm saying is it's got to be a balance. And we're starting to lose that balance. The less your phone is in your life, the more people will be in your life in a meaningful way, sitting down and having a cup of coffee and actually talking to someone. When I speak to high school kids, I challenge them. You know, they think I'm crazy when I say they're addicted to their phones. I said, go the whole weekend without it. And they all look at me like I'm crazy. When you have these better relationships, you'll be able to talk to people when you are going through difficult times. When someone tells you they're depressed, don't try and cheer them up. And I would have done it. If Sean came to me, he passed away in July. If he came to me in June, I would have gave him the typical father response. What are you talking about? Everything's great. You got a great job. Everybody loves you. You got all sorts of friends. I would have handled it wrong. That is the worst thing you can do to someone with depression, is try to make them feel better. If they are opening to you and saying they have depression, you may be their only voice, their only help to get the treatment they need. And if you think someone is suicidal, then the most important thing to ask is, are you thinking about killing yourself? And I know it goes against every parent's brain to ask your child, are you thinking about killing yourself? Or a friend, are you thinking about killing yourself? But it is important that you are direct. You're not afraid of asking the question and then the answer that that person gives you. Your reaction is pivotal. Communicating your support is important, but you can't keep it a secret. And what we find with high school and college kids, they keep it a secret. And when that person tells their deepest friend or closest friend, or maybe just someone they're having a beer with that night, that person usually keeps it a secret, or they think they've talked through it. It is important that that person tells someone who can provide that person with immediate help. You must be their voice, because most of the time, the person with depression has literally lost their voice to get help. You may be their last-ditch effort. We're here tonight because I do not want any of you to have to go through what I, my family, and friends have gone through. Suicide is never, ever the answer. Suicide solves nothing. All it does is transfer the pain from one person to many. The hopelessness you feel will not last. It is a mere moment in your amazing life. Don't lose hope. Get help. Sean had a disease. His brain attacked him on July 18th. No different than when blood cells attack a person with cancer or when a heart attacks a person with heart disease. But unlike cancer or heart disease, we can help our loved ones with depression by being aware of it and allowing the person to ask for help without feeling shame, weakness, or not worthy of our help. Silence and darkness are the assets of the disease called depression. Communication and openness are the tools to beat depression. We found a video of a song which I think just crystallizes what we're going through as a family. And I want to share that with you and then have some concluding remarks. Keaton, could you come with this? 3,000 people came to Sean's viewing. Over 1,500 people came to his funeral. The procession to his grave was 3.5 miles long for cars. And everybody asked, why? And for the rest of my life, I will be asking why. Why Sean? And Sean wasn't and will not be the first person to lose his battle with depression and anxiety. He won't be the first story where you hear about a kid who had so much promise in front of him. He won't be the first person who you will ask the question, why? Why did his life end? But he might be the first person to get us to talk about mental health and really talk about it. And not just check in on how someone is doing, but truly and honestly going up to people in your life and sharing feelings that cause you to be vulnerable, then matching that vulnerability with empathy. There should be no stigma about depression, anxiety, mental health issues. Only conversation, treatment, awareness, and compassion. We hope tonight we begin those steps to unlock the light. And I thank you for your time. And we're here to answer any questions if